Welcome to the Kid and Drag Gaming Podcast. This is Kid.
And this is Drag. Remember, if you're enjoying the content, go check us out on our socials. Follow us so we post our latest updates. On Instagram, you can look for us at Kid in Drag. On Facebook, same thing, Kid in Drag. If you're follow us on Twitter, go for Drag Kid In. Also, check out our website at kidindrag.chat. You can find all of our latest episodes. All of our stuff is out there. You can contact us. We can get direct feedback from you and help you get the content you want to hear. Now, let's talk about all the stuff you want to talk about. All right, and today we are here to talk to you a little bit about controllers. No, I'm not talking about those freaky psychological nightmares that want to take control of your life. I'm talking about the things that want to take control of your gaming life. So there's been a lot of evolution through controllers and how those have evolved since the beginning from the Tandy to today. We're going to do an overview of some of these things and what that evolution looks like. We're going to wrap this up talking about some VR stuff. So, Kid, why don't you take us a little bit through the standard controller and how that progression kind of went over time?
Well, I'd have to start off with the Atari 2600 was probably my first controller. So you really think about where we're at today and you jump back to then where it was one button and a joystick. How in the world have we made it so far, like back then, that one button could do everything you wanted to do in a game?
Right.
The control with the stick. Granted, it's much smaller now, but back then, how in the world did they think that was a good idea? And thank God it's no longer like that. So,
well, one of the cool things about that stick, though, you know, although the evolution, as we get to talking about that analog nature of the stick controller, and I know the original ones weren't really awesome because they had 4 or 8 directions, right, that you could move. And it wasn't as good, but it started that idea about that analog movement. And, you know, I'll argue that is irreplaceable in a lot of games. It doesn't matter what system you're on. If you're doing a racing or flying or something that takes those little minute adjustments through it, there is nothing better than that analog. So, yeah, that's a terrible controller. I can remember playing in those days with that little square box and the red button and the one stick. And I thought it was the coolest crap in the world. But yeah, absolutely. It's evolved a bunch, but I think it was important to have that analog feel.
But I will say that I don't ever remember one of those being broke. So they were very well made. And I know kids rage smashed stuff back then because I was one of them.
Oh, absolutely. That has definitely gone across my living room. I had more of a problem with screwing up the port that it plugged into because it snatched my console off. And it only took a couple times, and I started to calm down and figured out other outlets for my aggression.
So they definitely paved the way for a lot of things that we have today. That was my first experience with a controller. Good memories, but I'm glad we're away from it. I would say the next one I dove into was the NES controller. So we had one D-pad, 2 buttons, and 2 options. And man, I want to tell you, speaking of indestructible, there was so many games on the NES that I tried to twist that controller in half just so I couldn't play that game anymore, and that controller would just spring back to where it was.
Oh, absolutely. I know we talked about that in a past episode about how well those things were made, and I agree. I think they did a great job. And not to get too far off topic, but I got to tell you, I was at the Up Down bar last week, and I was pretty excited about it coming to town because gamer bars, how can you go wrong? There's beer and games and music. You can't really beat that combination in my world. But I'm going to tell you, Kid, it messed me up because we missed reviewing a really awesome Nintendo game. And I had a lot of fun playing it. Played a ton on that very controller you're talking about. And that was Mario Brothers. Forget the Super Mario Brothers. But I forgot all about it existing where you had to run under the things. It was almost laid out like Donkey Kong, and you had to bounce the turtles upside down, then run up and kick them over. And then you had little crabs that did all the little sidewalk stuff, and you had to bounce them twice. Man, I played that game like 9 times in a row. That was awesome. But that was one of those games you're talking about rage twisting a controller.
Oh yeah.
That was the first one right there. Because that damn little butterfly, when I didn't realize that they bounced and you had to hit them on the ground the first time, probably because wasn't paying attention to the instructions. I remembered all over again because I did that all over again. So,
Or getting hit by the bullet on the last stage.
dude,
That's when the integrity of the controller got tested to the
yeah,
fullest.
yeah, absolutely. That was we got to see how good those babies really were at that time.
So have you held NES controllers since the modern day controller?
I have. It is feels extremely small, but again, my hands were a quarter the size they are now. I can palm a basketball now. Back then, I couldn't hardly pick up a 20-ounce Coke. Well, they didn't have that. They had 12-ounce Coke cans. I could hardly pick one up, right? But it did feel like super, super small. I think it still felt really solid or whatnot, but it just felt like way small. Like it was almost cartoonish small to me.
Yeah, and then the NES controller was great, and then whenever the Genesis come out, I'm like, oh my
Mhm,
god, they rounded the corners. This thing feels
mhm.
so amazing, and we got these top buttons now, and it all feels great. And I don't know how we had the NES controller, and that was some good stuff along with the SNES controller. Pretty much same size, a little bit smaller, but
Mhm.
had two more buttons,
Right.
and that was evolution-y.
Mhm,
And oh my god, the SNES was such a wonderful system. I had the
mhm,
Genesis. My friends had the SNES.
mhm.
Didn't get one till later, and that's a solid system, solid controller.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah,
I
when
even
I
had
looked at I think the Genesis really had its popularity and fame because it did evolve the controller. When you looked at it, the things you're talking about rounded, fit to your hand a little bit better. You got two extra buttons. It was pretty cool. I think that got a lot of attraction to go look at Sega in the first place because that was, that was the second line, second tier wannabe gaming console at that time, right? It was all about the Nintendo, but that came out like at that time. That was a space age. Oh my God! Look how advanced this controller is, right?
oh yeah, and then at the end of the era of that console, they come out with the turbo buttons on there, and I'm like,
Hmm.
holy crap, what is this madness?
Yep. It
And
was
I'm
the
surprised.
origination of the macro. You know.
Yeah, I'm surprised that's not more relevant nowadays, but whatever. Uh,
Hmm.
and then you got the N64 come out with the pistol grips, is what I call them.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Oh my god, this is amazing. This
Hmm.
is true evolution." And then they had the 3 pistol grips, and man, that is so wonky feeling now that I
Hmm.
I use that. Let's see, 1 D-pad, 1 stick, 6 buttons,
Hmm.
3 shoulders, and 1 option.
Yeah. I couldn't figure it out. I understand where they were going with that. They're like, oh, we're gonna design the game so you move your hand over to the center position for the joystick. But I was really frustrated with that thing the whole time, like going through the N64 phases. I can get the appeal. You've got the analog stick back integrated because at that time, right, you went from, as we talked about, the Atari or the Tandy or whatever that had the single stick. Then we went to Nintendo and the Sega controllers. Well, this was an immediate throwback of a lot of people at that time going, "Hey, where's my analog stick? Where's that controller feel? It's not as cool to fly or drive or whatnot." And that was kind of a repercussion of that. However, um, I give Nintendo, on my personal opinion, like a solid D plus on that execution because I really didn't enjoy playing with that, and that's one of the few Nintendo controllers I can say that about.
Yeah, I don't know, at the time, it was great, but man, I actually picked one up not long ago, and I'm like, "Oh my dear lord, what were they
Mhm,
thinking?"
mhm,
So we're diving into the Dreamcast, and I had one many years after it come out, so I didn't get to enjoy it at the time. But that controller felt actually pretty good, pretty solid. The one thing they had going for them was a little memory card you could pop in and out that had the little screen on it.
mhm.
I'm kind of surprised that they didn't continue that. I guess a Switch did in a somewhat degree, but that was kind of evolutionary too, where you could. I remember on Resident Evil, it had the map on that little screen,
Mhm.
and you could look down and kind of see where you were at.
Right. It gave it that second screen feel that we know and love so much, and I know World of Warcraft. that's a big one where two screens really enhances the gaming because you can put your inventory and all that stuff over into a second screen. If you go back to some of the handheld consoles, agreed with the Switch, but then you go back to the Game Boys, and it had they eventually evolved into the two screen that operated much the same way, and it was pretty cool. I put a lot of hours into that Game Boy because that was a pretty awesome portable system, but it was a Game Boy DS or dual screen. So
Yeah, okay. It wasn't the map on Resident Evil. It was your health bar, I think, that went across that little screen.
hey, you can't have too much complex stuff. This was in
Yeah, I'm getting ahead of myself
25,
there.
25, 30 years ago.
It's all coming back to me. So then
Uh-huh.
you jump into the PlayStation,
Mhm,
where you've got comfortable grip, you've got two more shoulder buttons, everything's going on, and like, oh my god, this is great.
mhm,
And then at the end of its era, they come out with the joysticks.
mhm.
And then that was really groundbreaking for PlayStation. Like that was kind of what sold me on PlayStation
Right.
was the control in itself.
Mhm.
And plus it had a lot of really good exclusives. So
Yeah, I agree. That was a better execution on the first molded fit because that Nintendo N64 turned me off so much to that and this is just a personal preference. I get people are all different about that, but I didn't like how it felt. Hated it. I saw that Sony and picked it up, and I mean, to me, it was amazing. It didn't have joysticks on it initially, which again, I think that was screaming and demanded pretty quick after they went away from, even though it was a stupid joystick. Um, I think that's been a demanded thing, and it's never gone away since then, right? So I do think they executed pretty well on the controller on both cases when they added the joysticks. Before the joysticks, it definitely had a better pistol grip or molded to your hand feel, but it's pretty awesome. Made playing a whole lot easier, and it made it probably less carpal tunnely, like,
yeah,
playing those square controllers. You had to contort your hand around the controller, and this was like, hey, you're gonna sit in front of a game for 12 hours. We're gonna give you something that's not gonna make your hands feel like you got arthritis at 12 years old.
heck
And
yeah.
yeah, high five to Sony for that, and ton of other inventions, but that was a really good one. I would agree with that.
Yeah. And then we jump into GameCube. And this is the last console I had for Nintendo in quite some time.
Mhm.
The control was, kind of molded after the PlayStation, but it was smaller. And the buttons were kind of funky laid out a little bit more, but it felt
Uh-huh.
good
Mhm.
if my hands would have been smaller. Like if the controller would have been enlarged like 20-30%, probably would have been the most comfortable controllers I ever held.
Mhm.
It was just real
Did
small.
did you like how they dropped that? I know the shape's kind of independent because they just cut away some of the body, but did you like how they dropped the joystick and the D-pad down off of the traditional layout at that time?
I think I did. I really did. I think
Mhm.
it's what drawed me to it.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know. The GameCube was pretty good. They had really good graphics coming out at that time.
Uh-huh.
Like I said, I always resort back to Resident Evil because they're always top notch in anything they come out. And I
Right.
played Resident Evil 4, and that
Mhm.
game just felt real good and smooth.
Mhm.
So next, we'll dive into the Xbox old original controller.
Mhm.
Oh my dear lord, this thing was like holding a sack of potatoes. The controls were so wide and spread apart that it didn't take them long to get a new controller made. I think it was like a year.
Right.
And they're like, oh, yeah, no, we can't do that no more. And I don't know what Xbox was thinking, but thank God they recovered from that one.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that, man, that's straight marketing because they took up how much real estate on that controller just to put that big, huge button right in the middle of it, right? And just stretch the whole thing out. Um, it kind of ignored, and I thought it was kind of weird how they went completely away from PlayStation and Nintendo and made this big fat controller where you can definitely see in the style with the PlayStation and the Nintendo was exceptionally that way, where they cut away as much fat as they could off the controller, get that plastic out of the way. Xbox went completely the other way and tried to hand you the biggest freaking brick they could hand you.
And that they did. And that, oh my God, I don't even want to talk about that no more.
Yeah.
So we got the Xbox out of the way. Then you got the 360. And I think the Wii remote come in there. And that was kind of evolutionary where it was nunchuck styled, if you will.
Mhm. Right.
where you could be sprawled out across the couch and don't have to have your arms in front of you. You could have behind your head and the other one hanging off the couch if you wanted to play.
Right.
Uh, the Wii bowling was always fun. I didn't get too much Wii experience, but the
Mhm.
controllers were pretty cool. I didn't care for the little one when you were doing like Mario Kart.
Mhm. Yeah, but I definitely think they introduced like the possibility of how virtual reality was going to work, right?
Mhm.
Because any controller up to that point, it was dependent on precision tactics and whatnot with your fingers, which it doesn't scale exactly. You move your finger a quarter inch to the right and you're spinning in circles on the old controllers, and this actually created physical activity. Think about the evolution at that time. Like it was hailed as, oh my gosh, video gamers won't be lazy anymore. They're going to get up and move around. That's going to be amazing. Right. And I
Yeah.
think it really gave that flash of brilliance that will later become VR with true motion. You can't just do it from a standstill location. And Nintendo, going back to what we talked about in the OG Nintendo about having the jump pad or whatever that was called, the action pad or whatever
Oh yeah.
that you moved around on. I think that's an important deal because ultimately, you don't want your kids, you don't want, as a person, you don't want to sit idle your entire life. And it gives you a different dynamic that you can get up and move around instead of sit stone cold still to enjoy gaming experiences.
Yeah. And then so good job, we
Yeah,
next
baby.
I guess the next thing would be the Connect, where you are the controller. You've got the
Right.
camera on you, you move, and it's essentially you're the button.
Hmm.
So that's getting you off the couch again right there.
Hmm.
Uh, it was pretty cool. I did the Just Dance game, I believe, with it.
Dude, I want to see a replay of that right now.
Yeah, no, that's called the Truffle Shuffle.
Truffle shuffle. Yeah, baby.
But yeah, the Connect was cool. It kind of died off though. Like I don't hear or see anything about that anymore.
Mhm.
And I guess jumping into the Nintendo Wii U gamepad,
Uh-huh.
where you've got the screen and all the controls on the one pad. Have you got any experience with that?
Just briefly, man. Like I went and played a demo of that. I don't know if I was at some electronics expo and played it. I think, if Nintendo had a tent set up or whatever was outdoor, I can remember that. I went up and played it. It's okay. I mean, it wasn't phenomenal, but not to roll back too far, but you look at today where virtual reality is hailed as like the next big thing. And remember that it's taken two components, right? It's spatial recognition and it's taking your movements. And if you basically take the Connect that you talked about and then the Wii and the Wii U, it's giving you the same components that they're achieving today with virtual reality, right? It's
Right.
spatial sensing, and then you've got the controllers themselves. So very, very, very similar. I was listening to you talk and remember that I'm like, yeah, basically the person that came up with VR just stuck those two things together and made what we're going to talk about later and what's being made and pushed today. But yeah, on the Wii U, it's okay, man. I tried it as a demo, and it just I'm with you that I haven't played just a ton of Nintendo games since that time. But decently built controller had some good features. I'm okay with it. Just nothing in my realm of playing today.
Yeah, I think the only experience I got is at GameStop. I went up and held it and said, it actually feels kind of good. I don't wonder how long the battery life is on these things. That's as far as I've made it.
Yeah.
So I guess that kind of gets us back into the modern day controller. So kind of the same thing we've been dealing with. PlayStation's got the touchpad, which they did some stuff with it. Pretty cool. But I guess the big thing nowadays is the Elite controllers, where you
Mhm.
got buttons down at your bottom fingers you just use to hold the controller.
Mhm.
I've yet to use any of them controllers, but I definitely see that being the way of the future and kind of a standard to controllers moving forward.
Yeah, I think I can't quote this, but I know the first time I was personally introduced to that method was the Scuff controller that they were basically modding out a stock controller from PlayStation or Xbox, and you kind of got to map what you wanted to do. And they're still making great custom controllers. I know there's some noise about their quality and all that stuff. I have a Scuff PlayStation 4 controller. I enjoy it, But the controllers on the bottom are the buttons on the bottom, right? This was kind of development for first person shooter guys who are girls that were trying to move really quick. And you think about when you're getting ready to take aim, you're controlling your direction of your character with the two thumbsticks. On traditional controllers, you have to remove your thumb to jump, to reload, to do all that kind of stuff. Even with the advent of the triggers and as they move from the two bumpers to the trigger and the bumper, it still required you to take your thumb off of the joystick to take key actions.
Uh, how,
Right. So now, go ahead.
how much are those?
The Elite is the Xbox Elite is, I want to say it's around 150 bucks, man. And like the Scuff, it just depends on how much you mod it out because you get to pick a lot of options that are some are color based, but the Elite kind of packaged it up. So my Scuff, I bought the most basic thing that gave me, simple upgrades because I was just going for the two buttons on the bottom. Well, they have additional things that the Xbox Elite controller comes with, and it runs like 160, 170 bucks or something like that. But it's the modability. Once you get the controller on the Xbox Elite, you can actually pull the joysticks off and change different styles of joysticks because some people like them concave, some people like them convex because they just how they like to move, and some games are different. And I'll tell you, like, there are controller extensions. If you were a big precision shooter, like I played a ton of Battlefield at that time, and there's an extension you put on top of the controller that makes it longer, which basically gives you more precise aim. I use the crap out of those. Well, the Xbox Elite comes that way. The Scuffs, you can buy replacements like that or change, and change out to what you want or order them specific. And I got to finding out that I used like the different lengths on the different joysticks. So, your left joysticks mostly go forward, backward, your right one's to aim, or that's how I configure it. Well, on the right, I had a really long joystick, and on the left, I left it normal as it came. Right. So it's just the modability, I think, really made it awesome. My Scuff, it takes some getting used to, but it is pretty awesome that you put your A and B button on there. The Elite comes with all four of the top buttons are on the bottom, but they're actually magnetic. So you can just pop off and use two or three or four or one or none. You have that option.
Oh, that's pretty cool. Yeah, I can definitely see how that would be beneficial. That's probably why I don't have one because I'm kind of an RPG guy, so I don't. I can remove the thumb off the thumbstick to do something.
Right. And that's really what it was all about. It's that split second that you have to do that when you're, you can move and run and shoot a little bit more effectively.
So let's give the $1 million idea away. What would you change or add to a controller right now that's missing?
Man, I think they're modding and you can pretty much get what I want. I like those buttons. I like the interchangeability or whatnot, but I'll tell you, like when I got to playing with the bottom buttons, here was where I ended up with the PlayStation Scuff controller. I got super excited because I'm a huge Xbox controller fan, always have been. It fits my hand, or the later generations, right? 360 and on. Those fit my hands better. And I never do like the PlayStation. I like the position of the joysticks, the D-pad, everything on an Xbox feels natural to me. Maybe it's the playtime I put in there or whatever. But then on the PlayStation, it feels like it's tiny little bitty crumply because I got huge hands, right? So I ended up with a PlayStation Scuff. I spent extra money because I went to the store, got excited about the Xbox Elite controller. I'm like, hell yeah, they've got a controller that's made by Xbox. It has these same mods on there. And when I get it home and start playing with it, to position my hands where I could access those bottom buttons accurately, I had my hand slid off the controller and my pinky was not on there correctly. It didn't feel comfortable. Well, the PlayStation, while it's a little smaller in the body, it was a little longer. The handles were. So when I got that Scuff, even though I had to slide my hands back to position them on the bottom buttons, it fit better. So if I had my druthers, I would love to have an Xbox that extended that wing down just a little bit because I've got big hands. But I think they could adapt that where it would work for people with small hands or whatever just as fine. It just needs to be probably like half an inch 3/4 of an inch longer, and it would be perfect for me. But that's my biggest gripe.
Yeah, I think mine would have to be you touch base on the elites where you can just pull the thumbsticks off, because I tore up the rubber on mine, and I was like, okay, I'll just get on Amazon and order some and replace them, and I did, and I wound up tearing my controller up and it no longer works. So it would have been nice if I could have just popped them bad boys off and popped some new ones on. So that's the only thing I would do, and probably like you said, if we're getting into the elite stuff, I could see how that'd be beneficial.
Yeah, I think just the durability, right? When you've got an elite controller, you've got a lot of parts that can be swapped out and reused. Like my son, immediately, I gave him my elite, and he thought I was the best person in the world because it wasn't working for me. I ordered the scuff, so he's all excited. He gets it. He immediately dropped off 2 of the paddles on the bottom. He said, "I just want A and B down there." And he's a big FPS, Call of Duty, Fortnite player, all that stuff. Well, that's what fit him. But now on the other side, he's got 2 extra ones of those if he ever loses one, right? So just having the changeable parts and making it modular like that's pretty cool.
Yeah, so that's kind of why we're doing the controller and VR, because you got to thinking about VR, and you're essentially the controller as your body movements and as that's evolving. And a surprise feature today, we're going to do a 2-part episode.
That's right. We're going to keep on with the controllers on part 2 of controllers, and we're going to dive a little bit more into VR. I know we had some listeners out there request that, so we've got 8 of the top headsets we're going to review on the next episode. Might be a little shorter, might be a little longer. We'll see. You never know how long we talk. So appreciate you. We'll holler at you on the very next episode.
Whoop-de-whoop.
And that's all we got to talk about today, folks. This is Drag.
And this is Kid. If you enjoyed our cast, make sure and check out our website, follow our socials. We love feedback. You give it, we'll talk about it.
You can find us at kidindrag.chat on our website. For Twitter, it's dragkidin. For Instagram, it is Kid and Drag. Same for Facebook, Kid and Drag. We take feedback on all of those social platforms, and we'll see you next time.
Later.